Looks like we're on YouTube now as we speak. So it looks like you sent us onto YouTube.
Oh, well, awesome.
Hey, everybody. So
We're doing this, Frank. We're doing it.
we're
Let's
doing
go.
this. So I did get you I sent you a link with our intro there.
Oh, here's the thing. I'm gonna need to log in. I'll do a different intro.
It's the wonders of live technology, right?
That's right.
I used to have Cam. Cam helped me, and then when he first left, it was touch and go. So I understand how it all is.
You can see that. This is on, right? You can see it.
It says live webinar. Yeah, I'm just double checking YouTube so I can get into the chat here. But it says we're on. Welcome out, Halftime Crew. We are a little early and a little technologically challenged, but well, you know that I am. So
I'm playing the fool today.
And yeah, I'll throw Tyler under the bus on this one.
I thought there would be one additional login. I was just trying to be prepared, get my ducks in a row when it went live.
There you go. Well, it says we're live. Yeah, we are live. Now I'm coming into the chat and welcome out, Halftime Crew. So yeah, we are officially live. It's an interesting way to start the show, but such is life. Welcome out, Tiago. Good to see you. Yeah, well, it's we're early on accident, not so much purpose. We're just trying to figure out the YouTube. We don't have the skill set. So yeah, you see Tyler's name. All right, we're going. We're doing this thing.
Let me throw this on, Frankie, and let's rock.
Right on. And welcome out officially, Halftime Crew. This is Coach Frank, along with Coach Tyler, experiencing some technical difficulties, but they're the kind that get you in early instead of late, so I will take them. And I hope everybody's having a great Friday. Tyler and I sitting in here one more time as everybody's having some fun down in Las Vegas. So welcome out, Halftime Crew. Great to see you as always. How you doing this morning, Ty?
Oh, Frank, I'm just delighted to be here a second day in a row. I feel like it's Christmas.
So I was excited about to see. I knew I was coming. I've taken over Fridays. I call them Friday Frank Day. I don't know that anyone else does, but I do. So I knew I was coming. I didn't know who was coming with me. I saw Ty. I was like, yeah, the band is back together.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So what are we thinking about this market? So Trump comes out and says he's not agreed to roll back tariffs. That's kind of the headline here today in the overall market. We just see some selling off of that, but a little bit of buying back. Much to see here is just some Friday noise.
Did he actually say that? I didn't see it. And you know what, Frank, did we not call it yesterday? I said, look, is this one of those Trump tweet things? Do you trust it? Do you not trust it? Right? So many plot twists with this adventure.
It is. It's always, I just try to ignore it. And I figure the good and the bad will kind of break even, and the trend usually wins in the end. So yeah, I don't know if it was in a tweet form or not, but that is kind of the big headline that the market seems to be looking at here today. It sure doesn't seem to be having much of an impact though on the price action. Still, still kind of hanging around right at resistance. It looks like to me.
Which is nice, right? I mean, I would prefer a market that doesn't respond to every Trump comment. It would be easier, right?
Absolutely.
So I think this is a good thing. And yes, I mean, it's kind of a non-event. The interesting thing is, if you attribute yesterday's gains to the optimism over rolling back tariffs, on balance, we're still higher, right? It's not like we've given back all of yesterday's gains. And so it seems like I'm with you. Market doesn't seem to care here. We're continuing this low volatility grind.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a good thing, because last Friday I didn't really mind the breakout on a Friday because it was such a big to do, right?
Yep.
On the S&P. I don't generally like breakouts on Fridays, though, if I can help it. If they want to wait till Monday, I'm good with that. So a little bit of consolidation. When we put the whole week together, we just we've seen some interesting moves on individual stocks, drifted a little bit to the upside, holding the breakout, one more confirmation candle, say on a weekly time frame. So I think you have to obviously there's a little day left, but we did come off of those lows here today pretty nicely. I'd expect not to see a lot more, very interesting price movement between here and the end of the day.
Totally agree. I mean, if anything, you'd just want more of the same. Well, shoot. I mean, if I'm going to ask for it, how about you just take us up 0.5% just for kicks? But yeah, I don't think this changes your bias from yesterday at all.
So yeah, I think and it's interesting. I got up early. I got up at a little before 6 because my body's not used to the new time yet, and I started scanning. We've been going through earnings, right? We're finally coming at the tail end, and I could tell today as I was scanning. I think I have about 80 stocks in my watch list to share with the in the scouting report meeting this afternoon. So there were a lot of interesting candidates out there, both bulls and bears. Surprisingly, I was having an easier time finding bears too this week than I had the last 2 weeks.
And that's likely a byproduct of the market being up a lot. I mean, if you think about stocks that have been in downtrends, if they're getting dragged higher with this, you got a lot more stocks at resistance than support. And I think just categorically, if we have a lot more stocks at resistance, particularly when you're extended into resistance, you don't have as many bull breakouts, but you got a lot of bear retracement setups when that's the case, right?
So exactly. I'm excited about it. We'll take a peek here today. One of the things we always used to do back in the market recap on Fridays is kind of browse through my my list that I kind of brought to discuss. But before we get into that, anything going on in the rest of the markets? I mean, pretty much, I think probably we're taking a peek at the rut. Dow, NASDAQ, very similar price action, a little, up a little on the NASDAQ, down a little depending on when you're looking on the Dow, but really very similar to the S&P. The rut's kind of the interesting one. We talked a lot about it yesterday, and as Condor traders, I think probably Team Tackle is probably interested, in the rut as well. Anything changed from yesterday? We still kind of thinking that until we get a close, we haven't got a close.
Yeah, I'm actually happy that this didn't get followed through because we had a pretty nasty sell-off intraday yesterday.
Yeah,
and
we did.
so I think that gives you a little bit of concern if you're bullish, but the fact that it came right back today, it's just chop, right? You look at this intraday and you'll see it came right back up after that pretty nasty sell-off day all day yesterday. So I'm a little emboldened here, Frank, to see this hold up nicely after a wicked intraday downturn yesterday.
Yeah, the breakout trader in me likes that chart. Hasn't broke yet, may never break, but I mean, we're fighting the good fight, right? We're at that very important zone where a break of would be, to me at least, a very clear bullish signal. I will expect price movement to the upside if we can get through that. On the other side of things, I look at a lot of breakouts and they don't always break out. And so, it is an interesting battle to say the least. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that as we're moving into the upcoming week. Let's take a quick peek here at our gold, silver, see how we responded off of yesterday. We saw quite a bit of selling. We're in that risk on environment. Certainly it's really felt that way for, gold this week, silver this week. A little more downward movement here today. Could we maybe interpret that as confirmation of a break of support?
Well, I think that if you're waiting for more confirmation, it's almost like, what do you want? Like, how far down do you want it to go to call it a clean break? And it doesn't mean it's doomed, but I would say you get a couple of closes below support, and that's pretty much the classic confirmation we look for.
Yeah, I would agree. My rule was always the break and the follow through. That's
Yep.
kind of my definition. I know there's, a break is important no matter what. And then depending on how, wimpy we are. But yeah, as of right now, I would call that a confirmation. I expect to see a little bit more movement, especially if the market continues this bullish run. Like we kind of talked about, I think yesterday, I would love to see gold pull back to the 200 to maybe start the new year. That might be a lot of fun. So
Yeah.
but we got a ways to
Well,
go
and
on that.
imagine how bullish the market. I mean, we'd have to have a pretty sick run into year end, I think, to kill this all the way down to 1400. It'd be sucky for gold bulls or gold bugs, but great for stockholders, I'm
So
sure.
exactly. I think if anything, we might see drift more than, it's always easy to see some pretty heavy selling early. Oh, it just broke support. You have the aggressive people getting in to the short side. You have the, okay, I'm hitting my stop loss, I'm closing out, that kind of crew. So it can kind of, put a little bit of little pressure in the short term, then kind of do a little back and forth. I'm still overall long-term bullish on gold, but we're definitely not seeing the signals. I don't think I think it's irresponsible from my technical perspective to think bullish bias, at least as of right now. Going to need some new development. And welcome out, Patricia. Great to have you. Hope you're doing well. And silver, same thing. We kind of saw that happening yesterday. So we're definitely kind of seeing, a little bit more of the same, not as quite, as polite as gold, as Tyler kind of was explaining yesterday. We definitely can see a little bit more movement right at that support level. So it looks like our metals are trending together in this risk on type of environment. I think from a bullish perspective, we do need to be careful. We are seeing some sell signals, breaks of support. Longer term, I think we're still looking, okay. We were looking a lot better last week, though. This is an ugly weekly candlestick. I don't think you can spin that any other way.
Well, I mean, no way, no way. You open at the high on the week, you could be closing at the low, heavy volume. You break a support, you break the 20-week MA. No, you can't spin that bullish.
No, it's just how bearish or are you leaving alone? I think that's what that
Yep.
candle tells me, bear or bust.
Yep.
As of right now, we're in the metals. And good afternoon or morning, yeah, depending on where you live. No follow through really in crude. We saw when we were meeting here yesterday over on crude oil, we were having a pretty good size candle. Not really a lot of follow through off of that, coming off of the highs yesterday. Did kind of bounce off the intraday lows today, but basically we're just stuck in the range, right? I mean, there's probably that's been some great price action for intraday players, I'm sure, off of the lows today into the highs yesterday into the lows. But for us swing traders, still stuck in the mud, still stuck in the range.
Agreed. Nice lower wick. I mean, I like the bounce back, kind of mirroring the S&P, right? Bounce back from the lower wick, but yeah, still messy, still choppy.
So yeah, I mean, I think you could aggressively, if we can kind of clear through that little that weekly resistance, I would expect a little more price movement to the upside. I just don't think it's a great swing trading environment. It's been a little while, and when it comes to energy and really anything, folks around here who know me, when we get choppy, that's great for cash flow, but there's always a nice behaving trend, or there's going to be in the not too distant future. We get things that are kind of in the chop. They're a lot tougher, at least for me they are. I'm a front runner, give me a lot of momentum one way or the other. That's where I feel most comfortable and confident. So I've been hanging away from crude for a while. One of these days we'll get a nice clean trend. I don't think we have to chase.
Agreed.
And nat gas is going to be the fun one, because I think we need to get through today, get into our open on the for next week here on Sunday. As of right now, though, we had that big gap, that nice little pullback. Today we've got a nice little doji on that pullback. Could be interesting if we see some upward movement to kick off next week.
Yeah, and we talked about this yesterday. Wanted to see another candle. When the second bar of a multi-bar pullback is a large range like that, it's tough to set up entry, stops, targets, and everything. You get a nice little doji though. Yeah, I mean that's a common refrain on our Friday meetings, isn't it, Frank? Just needs a doji.
Exactly. So many stocks don't get into the report because they need a doji.
That's
So
right.
I'm very interested in seeing how we open. The price makes sense, kind of at the top of that old range, that old resistance, slowed down, quite a big body candle, like Ty said yesterday. Got some time left today, not a lot of time. I don't expect to see much dramatic happen throughout the rest of the trading day. So certainly in an interesting spot. I think I'll probably be upgrading nat gas a little bit in my own personal rankings, and definitely will if we see a positive open here to start next week off.
For sure. Yep,
So
totally agree.
good afternoon, Linda. Great to see you here today. Any stocks in the news kind of catching your mind as we kind of, we're kind of working towards the end of earnings season. We did have a Disney, though, come
We
out
did.
with earnings and a pretty decent report. I didn't dive into their report. I don't know. Did you have a chance to read much into their report?
I did. Well, I didn't read into the actual. I actually wrote about them this morning, but I usually just scan the revenue and earnings per share. They beat on both. Which you would expect after in light of the gap higher. I don't know that I have any insight in terms of the numbers. I am happy that last quarter it gapped down. That weighed on it the entire quarter. This quarter we're gapping up. Seeing a little bit of profit taking. I mean, it gapped right into resistance though, and sometimes that's tricky. I would be surprised though, Frank, if this just completely gets clobbered. I would say that I think the bottom is in, and I probably want to be a buyer of dips going forward. I think this resets the trend and allows you to be a little more confident now.
I think so too. I think what I kind of want to see is it to kind of small body, a couple candles to start next week, drift down a little more, drift up a little bit, kind of build that. I always like, when we have that response to the earnings announcement and then we chill out for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then we break. I mean, if we kind of consolidate for a week and then break above 140, that would be interesting. If we maybe see some short-term moving averages rise up into some small body candles. But I am with you. I am definitely a buyer of Disney. Not today. Definitely needs a little bit of development for me at least. But gotta like that. Don't love the response because I mean it's easy to say it was at resistance, and I do love that, and that's great. A great call there. But when people love something, when they're real excited, they don't care, right? Especially on these earnings. So
well, 100%. And when you look intraday, I mean that's not exactly the response you want, but I don't know. I think that what it has going for it is it gapped up so much that it would take a pretty substantial sell the news type reaction to take this back to unchanged. I mean, that would be worrisome if it dropped that quick, but it had enough of a head start, I think, that it should end in the green unless something crazy happens.
Right. And who knows, maybe if the market was a little stronger today, we would have seen that. Not the greatest response, but can't blame anybody. If I woke up this morning, I don't hold through earnings, but if I woke up this morning to opening up near 140, I would have probably taken the gift and I'll reevaluate later. So I can't blame anybody for taking any profits by any stretch of the imagination. We are kind of wrapping up on the earnings side of things as we kind of get into next week. This is kind of the last big one next week. There's still going to be, close to 20, give or take, S&P 500 companies that are reporting earnings. You've got Applied Materials, Cisco, a big one, Discovery, so there are NVIDIA. So some interesting names with earnings next week. Walmart as well. How can I forget Walmart? But we are kind of coming out of the earnings season. We're kind of just moving into the rest of the year now, right? We'll see how this one takes us, but certainly not going to miss it. I'm always excited about earnings the first half, and by the second half, I'm just so tired of earnings season by the time it is all said and done. Let's take a quick peek here. Kind of give the team here kind of maybe a little bit of a peek into kind of how we rank the sectors as we're going into the upcoming week. I'm always, I always kind of, that's the number one thing I do in my routine. Personally, at the end of the day, is kind of one by one work through the sectors. Let's start with the I don't care. You can go in the order that you want. Let's go in your order. I have my order.
We'll go basic materials first. And we liked the rotation that we've been seeing, right? We talked a little bit about rotation into energy and mining, maybe helping small caps. We had a breakout. If you look at the weekly chart in basic materials, we had a breakout this week. And it's holding, Frank. It's holding. The breakout in basic materials is holding. Anytime you close near the high of the candle, that's always more bullish than if we gave it back. So all in all, I mean, it's gotten a little bit extended, but I'm liking the action this week. I think it's as good, if not better, than what SPY's done.
I think so too. I think it will probably, for me at least, be ranked above there. Not a lot of real clear resistance until we get into mid 61s, in my opinion. 61 and a quarter, 61.50, give or take. We got to go back a ways into last year to see that. Weekly trend looks great. Nice close, at least again, sometime before the day's over, but it looks like we're going to have a pretty decent close above that resistance. Definitely going to be an area I like. And again, seasonality wise, not a bad place to be either.
Agreed. Yeah. And one of the ones that you guys don't know this, but Frank and I had put Alcoa. This is one that was on our early watch list for the report as a breakout. And Frank, it's working its way up there, isn't it? It's looking a little better.
Yeah, I'm
And then
liking the way.
United States Steel too, right? A couple of areas
Yeah, and
still
I
looking
can't remember.
pretty
Maybe Omar, was it Omar who brought it up? I know someone brought it
yesterday.
up to
Yeah.
us, and I stole it. I put it on. I put it on our report. I took credit for it, by the way. So, but I'm loving that chart. It is a short-term trade, in my opinion, not an investment. But I am loving that. I hope that's exactly how we close going into tomorrow. Let's see. I might have had an interesting one or two within that space too. I was looking at a CE. That was one that was kind of an
Celanese.
interesting. It's kind of it's one of those downsides of starting early is it broke out and then kind of ran. That looked a lot better at 6 o'clock this morning. The candle
Yeah.
still looks good, but for a new trade, I mean, you could argue the chart maybe even looks stronger, but for a trade, that's a tough one to get into with that high candle off of the
Yep.
top there. So kind of a little bit of a bummer there. And the other one I was looking at was Olin Corp, OLN. It was kind of similar to US Steel in the sense of a breakout type of a pattern coming out of a long downward trend of recently put in that higher low. Pretty clear ceiling, as far as resistance is concerned. A little bit of room between, where that resistance zone is and the 200-day moving average, which is kind of what my eyes were drawn to
Yeah.
as at least a first potential first target. So some interesting things out there. You also, well, there's not much to see here. Air Products, APD. This is just one of my faves, one of my favorite stocks within this space. They've gotten into some trouble lately, but a good response to earnings, breaking out. You know what Matt would say about that one, and I would agree. But we consolidate there for next week, and then maybe see some running. That could be that's going to stay on my watch list. But that's a got to have development type of a candidate.
Yeah. It's pretty. It's
So
pretty, no doubt.
just too pretty, right? so
Well,
so
the tough thing is that the swing started at 213 and it's up, $20 in a row. That's the
Yeah,
challenge.
the price is right, but how we got there, I'm not loving it. But I always tell people, ask. I can ask if this sits and consolidates all next week on that resistance and then breaks that top next Monday.
Yeah.
Will I get it? Probably not, but what does it hurt to ask, right? I
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
what I want and why I want it. And well, it should be an easy thing to monitor throughout the rest of next week. It just keeps running. I'll just be cheering for it. I'm a fan, and I'm sure other people, own it. So I'll just be cheering for it. But selfishly, a little consolidation could go a long way. So, hey, Omar, you're supposed to take credit for anything that doesn't, that no one takes credit for. He says it wasn't him that brought up US Still. But if you've ever sat in our scanning report meetings, if there's no one's name on it, I'm like, it's me. It was mine. So how about
Yep.
how about the communication services sector? What are we seeing over there?
Lagging on this one. Testing resistance has not broken out yet. So this has been a sector we haven't loved as much. And I think until you could see the topping tails today and yesterday showing that sellers are active at this resistance area. I think this is a wait for breakout, Frank.
This is always tough. Technically, I 100% agree with you. I think that's a pretty clear, technically speaking. I've always, since its inception, just over a year ago or something
Yeah.
like that, I have a hard time with this as a vehicle because it's so heavily weighted to the two Googles and Facebook. That makes such a huge percentage. Those three or two companies and three stocks make up such a huge percentage of that. I have a hard time with. I don't use it as a vehicle, I guess is the best way to put it because of that. But I do agree technically if we can break through it probably would be a good sign for those things. Although, Google's had a heck of a week, knocking into about 13, and 25 yesterday, coming down a little bit here today, small inside candle, much like a lot of things kind of coming off of the tops, but a lot of nice strength over in Google. And Facebook's kind of got a little bit of a pullback going on post earnings as well. I thought Facebook is an interesting potential candidate. Google may be a little bit extended for my taste, but I did think Facebook was an interesting chart.
Yeah, I'm looking at the holdings in XLC. Let's talk about this for a second. If I'm going to make a communications sector, AT&T, I get that. Verizon, I get that. I'm thinking telecommunications. I don't understand this, Frank. Disney, Activision. I mean, yeah, because that's where I go when I want to communicate, right? I don't get it.
It is where I go. That's where, that's where I find my Justice Brothers. That's where I find my my Martin Brothers. So,
That's right.
but I used to complain about it all the time in the market recap days. Is it's so heavily weighted, as you can see there, between Facebook and the Google or Alphabet Inc. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what 40% of the ETF. Okay, fair enough. We got social media stuff. Then we have the traditional communications like AT&T. Then we've got watch it on streaming and Netflix, play your video games. I've always thought they just got a little too crafty, trying to take
Yeah.
some things out of tech and put it all together. Any of these groups make sense kind of as their own thing, but I am with you. I've always thought that this was a really weird place.
Yeah, that's weird. When they did like XLRE, the real estate, when they peeled that off of financials, it's like, okay, well, that's a pure play on REITs. That makes a little more sense. Peeling out the XLC, I share your puzzlement. I'm not sure of that one.
So that's always a tough one. I just look at that out of habit, and then I always go to the industry groupings, individual components within that space, because that's always been kind of a weird one. But there are some always going to be some interesting names in any space for
Yeah.
sure. So that break would be a good confirmation. But do always keep in mind, if you are trading XLC, in a large part you are trading Google and Facebook. And a little bit of other stuff. So
Yeah.
very heavily weighted. How about energy? This is a really interesting space because we've been seeing some signs of reversal coming off of support about a month ago, put in some higher lows and some higher highs at this point now. What are we thinking here?
So this is a good illustration of how trends build on smaller time frames, and then they grow in strength through larger time frames. And what we're seeing here is a trend try to build on the daily chart, but it's been bearish for so long on the weekly that I wouldn't fault you if you said, I want more confirmation. Frank's talking about, you got a nice double bottom here. You got a series of higher swing lows, higher swing highs. You're above the 50 and the 20 MA. So the daily trend is showing improvement. We had a nice breakout in Exxon this past week. But it's tough because when you look at the weekly chart, it's like, all right, well, give me above resistance levels, because on the weekly trend, you have not interrupted or reversed the series of lower swing highs yet. And so I'm emboldened by the double bottom here, Frank. I like the recovery so far, but building a new trade here is tough because bullish, that is, because the weekly hasn't confirmed yet, and maybe this gets smacked back down with like the last million rally attempts, and crude oil is not giving you a clue one way or the other because it remains just uncommitted in the middle of the range. So optimistic here. I will use the most useless phrase ever uttered, and that is, I'm cautiously optimistic.
Fair enough. And I found actually a couple candidates on both sides for the buyers and the sellers of energy. I thought APA had an interesting looking chart. Apache had a kind of an interesting chart where we've kind of held that support level, a little bit of a triple bottom style, broke resistance here early in the week, coming back down into tested. I think we probably have to break resistance for confirmation for my rules at least. But that there are a few, and that wasn't the only one that looked like that. That was just one of the ones I thought had the better risk to reward ratios.
Yeah.
On the other side, you've got an Oxy that just broke down a little bit, bounced back here today, but just broke down out of support after an earnings miss. So there's, I think legitimate candidates on both sides in energy. I think we'd be careful with it. You have to respect the short-term upward movement. Like Ty says, that long-term is still staring us in the face. There's easier places to be, I think, going into the upcoming week.
Well, and in general, it depends on what style of trader you are. Energy stocks are not usually a favorite area for swing traders, momentum traders, because it's not a momentum place, right? Like and this has been true for a long time. And the energy sector has not been like the place to go to find momentum and movement and nice trends. And so until that narrative changes, I think it's okay. But boy,
Yeah.
with so much exciting stuff elsewhere, it's hard to it's hard to justify.
Exactly. About once a year, you'll have a really good short-term bullish move on energy and a really good short-term bearish move on energy. And then the rest of the time, it's a whole lot of chop. You are
Yeah.
right. And certainly, in this type of market, unless I guess I love the energy sector or hate the energy sector, I'm probably looking elsewhere. But I do respect that price action, and if people are starting to move in, and they have been over the last several weeks. I understand where they're coming from. It's just not for me.
Well, and if you're trying to find something that's undervalued and not as lofty as some of these other areas, you could see the pitch for rotation into it. But I don't know. I mean, better places to fish, I think.
I would agree. I would agree.
You want to look at financials?
Of course, I want to look at financials. Tough spot. Although there's some interesting names in insurance, potentially, but just more strength, right?
Yeah, and these are the trends that are tough, where it's like, hang on now, give me an entry, just settle down for a few days, and give a brother a pullback so I can get in, and yet it doesn't want to. So it's on the big banks, the ones that are leading the space, the JP Morgans, the Bank of Americas. Yeah, they keep drifting up here, Frank, and every little intraday weakness has been bought up, and so until that changes, it does make it hard to find a swing entry. There's no doubt about that.
The banks have been so strong, and I'm still a big fan of them. But you're right. For new entries, for old entries, no, don't listen to what Tyler said. Banks, just
That's
keep
right. That's
running.
right.
But for new entries, it is true. I was finding some interesting breakout candidates, though, in the insurance space. We looked at Aflac yesterday, a little bit of a close above resistance, a little bit of follow through here today.
Yep.
Not really running, but I still think that's an interesting spot. Another one was a little smaller company, UNM. I really liked kind of them as a potential breakout candidate with a very clear level of resistance. They've got some work to do before they get there, but a very clear level of resistance. I didn't put all of them AJG, or as I always call them, AJ Green. They're knocking on the door of some resistance. Our old friend Bro, I know we've traded Bro. We've had it on the reports a few times. We love Bro just because its ticker symbol is Bro. Broke out, come back to the breakout point, now knocking on the door of that new shorter term resistance zone. So there was some interesting stuff going on in the insurance, I felt, coming into this morning, with this space. And on the other end of that side of things, there was actually a little pullback on JHG. It was tough to find pullbacks in the financial sector here today. Not a very steep pullback, but a nice candle that's developed so far today. So certainly some interesting names. Still a lot of strength, a lot more strength, in my opinion, than weakness. As I was looking at the individual components, most of it was, you can't trade that, but it's still strong, is kind of what I was really seeing in the financial sector.
Yeah, for sure. Industrials, maybe not as strong, but strong nonetheless. You look at this on the weekly chart, and what's exciting about getting a breakout after 2 years of sideways, the phrase that I like, Frank, is the longer the base, the higher in space. So maybe we talked about that yesterday, but
I love it.
Well, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the we talked about how the S&P really hasn't gone anywhere for 18 months, and now we're breaking out. It's like a coiled spring or just pent up energy. The longer something goes sideways, the more significant overhead resistance becomes, then the more exciting it is when it finally breaks out, and the more power it tends to have. So this is, if you wanted to say, give me one chart that tells me why I shouldn't be bearish on the stock market, I'd say, well, how about this one? How about this one? I mean, does that look bearish to you? The fact that, we could have resolved ourselves lower a million different times and we didn't, we're breaking out to an all-time high in industrials. There's nothing bearish about that chart. So it looks great on the weekly, Frank.
It does. It looks like an inverted head and shoulders on the weekly, doesn't it?
It does.
Confirmation this week. So yeah, it's a strong space. We've seen weakness in some of the defense, Lockheed, not NOC, but even some of them are starting to, they still maybe look a little more like retracements than reversals, but they've kind of got in on the action. Railroads have been strong. I believe it was UNP was the one I was looking at, because some of them have already kind of ran.
Yep.
UNP's got a very clear resistance level at 180. So again, one of those probably not, it's probably in my report and not a TACO report, because we need some development. But we've seen a lot of strength in these railroads, and a lot of strength overall within this space. Boeing's kind of had its ups and downs as far as being a negative influence on XLI. Some of the defense have been showing some signs of weakness, and they were so strong throughout much of the year. But overall, it continues to be very strong. I mean, like Ty said, when you look at that weekly chart, it's just how bullish are you? A bearish argument becomes very difficult, at least technically, when you look at that chart.
Yeah, totally agree. And we've had a few of these on the reports. CMI, this one's really taken off today, Frank. So we caught the bull retracement on the report. CAT is one. I don't think we had this on the report, but the breakout and run in CAT, I mean, we've seen a big turnaround with this industrial company, and it just doesn't want to stop.
It's impressive. Yeah, it's on my list for next week. We got to take a look at GE. Good call. It'd be more fun if Timmy was here, but it's fun nonetheless. GE comes out. It's 2 quarters ago now. They got the new CEO, so they've been trying to change their ways. And Tim will never probably believe in them, but a good response to earnings, and then that's an earnings runner, right? I mean, we got to resistance. We took 1 day off. We're like, yeah, whatever. That is an impressive run. I don't know what you do with it. Technically at this point, very extended, but a break of resistance, a lot of positive momentum.
Well, and it goes to show the challenge of shorting a stock that just is beaten silly. This is the fear if you're shorting something like this, right? You're saying, I think GE is toast. It's the same thing with GameStop. I think the fundamentals are crap. And this is why it's so hard, because it's like you're gonna be short and sit on this thing from $8 to $12 and see it go up 50%. Like, good luck.
You don't want to get caught in there. Nope. I know Tim doesn't do that. He just likes to pretend he does. He just looks for the shorts. He can't wait till the bad earnings report. Sooner or later they will miss, and then we'll hear all about it. I've not heard one peep on GE this last week from Tim.
Well, and that's the thing is it's like it can. The John Maynard Keynes phrase is the market can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent, which is to say that it can go so far against you that you blow up before your thesis is proven right. And that's, anybody who's short selling GE can make a very compelling argument based on the fundamentals, but that doesn't change the fact that it just ripped 50% in your face.
Right. That's a short term. That's why we always got to be careful. That's why we trade what we see. We say it a lot because it's easy, especially as traders and investors, we wear 2 hats. And while I would never invest in a GameStop, we kind of used that as an example yesterday, Tim would never invest in a GE, and a lot of people probably wouldn't, at least as of right now. And I don't want to speak 100% for Tim, but I think he's made his point clear on this one.
Yeah.
The trader in me says, hey, the price action is the price action. And so it's sometimes important to remind yourself what hat you're wearing as you're evaluating, whatever, because that can absolutely change your bias and change what you're willing to do.
Well, and it definitely makes us a candidate on a dip, maybe. Anytime, one of my favorite types of stocks to look for is one that just had really great momentum, because they're always interesting candidates on the subsequent retracement or pause. I mean, you give me 3 or 4 down days, and that's pretty clean. You've got a very easy break of resistance here. Any kind of back test into that area, Frank, I think is an interesting retracement setup.
I would agree. So depending on how next week plays out, maybe it is on our list. It'll get vetoed, but maybe it'll be on yours and my list.
I'll throw it on there.
You. Appreciate that, Scott. Yeah, good. And good to see you, Scott. It's been a bit since I've seen you. Hope you're doing well, my friend. So, all right. So there we are. So we're through industrials. Now we're getting to our friends over in technology. Big leader early, kind of a okay week, right? In the space as a whole. Anything that has changed from where kind of were last week? It was one of, if not the most bullish area that for many of us coaches at Tackle Trading last week.
Yeah, I think maybe it's just the higher it goes, it's out of breath, and it just takes a little more oomph to accelerate from here. I mean, if you've gone nowhere for 2 months and you break out, it's easy, I think, to accelerate. Once you're already kind of in this rate of ascent, I think it's challenging to expect, okay, buddy, now really put it into high gear. He's like, well, what do you want, man? You're so hard to please. Like, I'm already in high gear. How about I just maintain and you'll be happy?
A little
So
rest.
yeah, give a little rest. So Apple still looks fine, but candle wise, it hasn't done anything for 5 days. But I think after the run, you're probably happy it didn't have a 3-day pullback, right? Like, that's pretty impressive that it can stay aloft even after it's extended. Google yesterday made a run, today hanging out up there. I just think a lot of these are just hanging out. That darn Amazon, it fell asleep again today, Frank. And
it's just not the place to be right now. No, it seems, it's one thing when it's not doing anything, but we're drifting. It's not only not that, it's just we're just continually drifting to the downside. Interesting. What about I did find a few interesting things. Pan W was interesting, although one of those that really got running here today. I guess it was a little too interesting for a Friday morning. I was looking at for a potential break. Looks like as of right now, I should have just looked at it as a potential pullback. So
right. Well, and if you look back, this used to be a big runner, right? I mean, this has been, you go back. Right. What do these guys do?
These are an internet service company.
That's right. So yeah, I mean, $40 to 250 ain't bad. So when they get running, I mean, they move. So yeah, if they want to jam it back up to the high, it's got some room there, Frank. I think it's worth putting on the.
I've definitely got my eyeballs. It moved. And then one other one, it was on a report a few weeks back, CDW had ran into the second target, probably, the day after earnings. So probably got out a little bit before the earnings announcement there, but it's kind of drifted back, pulling back. Nice candle here today. A little pullback type of a candidate I thought worth maybe keeping an eye on going into next week.
Yeah, it's pretty. I like that one. Tell me real quick, what do you think about this dip in Facebook? Too messy?
Kind of like it. I won't lie, and I'm not a big Facebook guy, and I'm not a huge Facebook trader. I don't really like their price action. I think what would be ideal is maybe a Monday, Tuesday small body before kind of an upward momentum, putting in a very clear, maybe 2-3 day top, say using today's high on Monday and maybe even on Tuesday. If it develops that way, I could be interested. Absolutely. If it were to go above today's high on Monday, I don't think I would be. I know that's kind of picky.
Yeah. Well, geez, Frank. So it's got to bounce at 7:25 a.m. on Thursday. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Right?
I asked nicely. I promise.
It made it unnecessarily messy. This was tough after that darn earnings candle. Just messy. This would have been much more clean if it had held the breakout, popped a couple of days, then given me a pullback and held the breakout area. At this point, it's like, I double dare you to try this, right? It's not making it easy to throw it on the report.
It's tough. And when you put it in the context of the rest of the market, the rest of the market's having a good time, and where are you at, Facebook? People are supposed to be excited about those earnings. Yep. I think development is the name. I am interested, and I do kind of like the general price point of that old resistance zone. But I think for me, you got to be picky, and I've got lots of candidates, and I want things that don't, for right or wrong, but right. So
yeah, no, good answer. All right, staples. Staples. The most exciting sector that we're going to look at today.
Right.
So these have been, on a positive note, they have not gotten beaten up near as bad as utilities and REITs, those bond proxies. And this does sometimes move with that group because of the dividends, the higher dividend yield. But it is nothing to see here move along, right?
Yeah, a little more of the same. And much like last week, where I downgraded it last week, still overall, like Ty says, I mean, it's held its own, and then you compare it to utilities and REITs and, gold, the more defensive areas. It absolutely, I always call this kind of a hybrid. It feels like it can work either way. When things are great, it can move. When things are poor, it can hold its own. So it feels like it's somewhere in the middle to me. But one thing that I've, seen, and I saw it last week and I saw more of it this morning, there are more signs of weakness. You have something like a BLL that I believe was in our report last week. And I think we have a new entry coming into potentially next week, putting together a little bit of a floor here this week. So we had the initial breakdown late last week, kind of Monday, Tuesday really kind of sold and then flatlined here, but a lot of weakness. CL, another one, a little bit of a bearish retracement. And I was seeing this in a lot of things within this area that, I found some good bear candidates, I thought, at least within this space. And then you look at things like, Cokes and the Pepsis and the big names, and it's not necessarily that they're bad, but it's not good,
Yeah.
so it's hard to really get excited about this space. I think this is one worth watching. I think we're seeing a little more weakness than we've seen in quite some time within some of the companies in this space. I think it's a little bit weaker than the chart on XLP indicates. At least that's what it feels like to me.
Well, and especially there's two ways to look at things. One is what we call looking at something on an absolute basis, which is XLP's chart in a vacuum. And then the second, which is more comparative, is to look at it on a relative basis, right? So you could say XLP on an absolute basis looks fine, but on a relative basis with everything else ripping higher, it's kind of like, well, I mean, it's a laggard, right? So when you bring in the relative comparison, it certainly doesn't look as good.
So yeah, it's got some work to do, I think.
All right, REITs. This one, I'll start on this one. So continuing the theme from yesterday, right? This is very interest rate sensitive. And Frank, bonds are getting wackaroonied here. Continuing to see, you can see it a little easier on the futures. So bonds are rolling over, excuse me, which means interest rates are running higher, right? Interest rates are running higher. And so I don't know if this is updated intraday, Frank, but TNX is the 10-year yield. And 10-year yield was 1.4% 2 months ago. We're now pushing towards 2%. We've seen a pretty big pickup in longer term interest rates, and that is hurting interest rate sensitive sectors like REITs. I think what's interesting about this, Frank, is on the negative side, this is not good if you own REITs. You're taking a little bit of a hit. On the positive side, at some point, I mean, as lower the stock goes, the higher the dividend yield gets. So, at some point, you'd think money would rotate back in here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in, and I think it's starting to get technically a little bit interesting. I was actually very surprised. I found some things I want to keep an eye on for sure in this space. American Tower maybe being the first one on that list, AMT, pulling back into the 200-day moving average all week long, really kind of held its own, an old support zone. I like the price. I don't love how we got there, and I don't like the relative weakness that we're seeing, but I like where we're at there. Store was another one, STOR. Nice bullish retracement, kind of stuck between the 20 and the 9 all week long. And so there are actually starting to be some technical setups within this space that I absolutely wasn't finding last week. And quite honestly, I was a little surprised to find this morning. Maybe we need a little bit of time. Maybe we need to see some money start working back into it, maybe pull back in the market. But I'm with you, Ty. It may still be for weeks to come, but eventually these REITs and those improving dividend yields are going to get to the point where, yeah, why not take a stab? I mean, it is a REIT, while American Tower can move pretty quick for a REIT. Store, and REITs in general are not known for their tremendous volatility, right?
Well, and it's a good it's a good lesson because eventually everything comes back into favor, particularly when it's an ETF, particularly when it's a dividend payer and something that's been as consistent as XLRE. And so it never really pays to be overly negative on something like this particular sector. Right.
Exactly. I'm really interested in hearing Mark's take on it, because Mark's always pounding the table on the REITs. When I talk to him, he always says that we're not bullish enough on the REITs, right? So
That's right.
we finally got a real decent pullback. And again, maybe we aren't there. We're maybe not done just yet, but we are starting to see some of these things dip down into much more interesting prices than they were just in the not very distant past. So definitely something to keep an eye on. I think technically, maybe a little more work to do though. And
Agreed. And I think our commentary on utilities would be the same. I mean, these guys are pretty much moving in lockstep. Do you have any particular stocks in this sector or same thing?
It was kind of the opposite, could I do REITs first? And then utilities is the last group of stocks I go through in my as I'm going through my giant list. And I was figuring, I found, half a dozen REITs that are interesting. I'll probably find half a dozen utility stocks, and I didn't find any. So while I'm starting to see, technical catalysts that could prompt some buyers in the REITs across the board, I really wasn't seeing it in utilities at least this morning, and doesn't look like anything that's happened so far today will have changed that. Fundamentally, I think the same can apply. I do believe that, but it seems like maybe if it's a turnaround quickly in these, more defensive areas, I, from a charting perspective, at least see an easier time coming into the REITs, whether it's the pullback on store, a couple other things. I think was another one that was at the 200-day moving average in the REITs. There are places that I could talk myself into buying a bullish retracement on store, whereas on utilities, we're not there yet. We haven't pulled back maybe deep enough to be testing the 200s, but we're breaking through 50s, breaking through support zones. So I was a little surprised. I did think it would be a little closer to the REITs, but it actually was, I found literally nothing that I thought was worth putting onto a watch list for Monday morning in this space.
Yeah. All right. Adios, utilities, healthcare. It's a pretty pullback. Now, we talked about healthcare last Friday in the report, and we loved the breakout, right? We loved this breakout, nice volume coming in. I mean, it looks strong. The challenge was, I believe that was Friday. Yeah, last Friday. So the challenge was you had that nasty reversal candle right at a logical resistance zone. If I go to the weekly chart, basically we were butting our heads up against resistance after a nice breakout. And so the sentiment was, well, good, because you don't want to chase it there anyways. Give me some consolidation, give me a pullback to give me a lower risk entry. And as Frankie says, you just asked nicely, and the market gods deliver. So that was pretty textbook. I mean, 3-bar pullback, bullish reversal, and so far it's behaving nicely.
So it was nice, BMY was a really nice candidate, as I kind of, because of that placement, we kind of had to, it was going to have to be stuff to follow throughout the course of this week. I threw this one up on the Tackle Trading Twitter. If you're not following us on Twitter, I try my best to put up interesting charts for our team. So, join us over on Tackle Trading. Shameless plug for sure. But certainly some nice movement over there. It's not seeing some nice movement in this space though, and it's going to ruin I was ready for this one. ZTS. I was ready to pound the table for ZTS in our meeting here today after earnings, gapping up on earnings yesterday, selling all day long into that support zone here, on yesterday's close, breaking through it today. Now, that's a tough new trade to get into. But boy, that is not a pretty looking response to earnings. I was excited to share this one, but it was too ready to roll, it looks like.
Yeah, that's a nasty response. You feel sorry for the sucker who bought it yesterday morning.
Oh Lord, yeah, that's no fun.
Nope. I'm also noticing some pretty heavy distribution. The last 3 major downswings, you're seeing some pretty heavy profit taking. So yeah.
It's an interesting one. Other interesting chart in this space, at least I think it's interesting, is Mylan, MYL. They are sitting right at a support zone. I don't know that there's anything, worth, thinking about doing today on this, but whenever something's at these major resistance or support zones, as everybody who knows me knows this, I'm always keeping an eye, whether it's, hey, I'm going to buy the bounce. That's not my style. If it breaks, I'm going to look for sell entries. But it can really work either way, because I'm not looking for sell entries until it breaks. Right. And so I'm always looking for those, clear lines in the sand that this is where people buy. If this breaks, stop losses are getting hit, probably bears are getting in. If it holds, I shouldn't be surprised. It's been holding all year long. I thought placement wise, that's an interesting chart.
Yeah, one other one that I had on my list was Amgen.
Ooh, I did too. Very nice. Very nice.
I like the breakout after earnings, heavy volume, buy volume, or accumulation day. And then 4 day sideways. I mean, it could have pulled back. It didn't want to, and it goes up today. I wouldn't have minded this going sideways a little bit longer, let that 20 MA catch up. But
Right.
it's a leader in the space right now. And I think if I want exposure to healthcare, a chart like this looks pretty to me.
Certainly an interesting chart for sure, and a little sticking his nose above there at least makes our entry point, fairly clear, right? If I'm
Yeah.
interested in this, up above today's high on Monday morning would make for a pretty easy entry for my rules at least. So definitely some interesting things in there. We definitely got some nice pullback candidates. It's not all, it's never all, right? There's always somebody who's doing just the opposite of all of their friends, but for the most part, I think it did us a solid by giving us that pullback opportunity, which is now potentially bleeding into some potential breakout opportunities a few days into the movement.
Yep. All right. Discretionary.
The place that time forgot. What the heck's going on here? Nothing. There's just nothing. It's
Nope.
there's just not been any movement. I mean, there's always individual companies, and boy, I got a few in this space, one way or another. But across the board, and I think a big part of it is some of the big names have been, Amazon, the biggest representative of that. We took a look at them, and there's just a big nothing to see, and they're such a big part of the total composition. But then you've got your Starbucks, your McDonald's, although Starbucks I think is worth taking a peek at because it's sitting on its 200-day moving average. This is a battle in my mind, and it could go either way. The longer we sit at the 200, the more tempting, but it's the 200-day moving average. But we are building a floor. If that breaks, certainly we've had to show weakness to get here, and while I might, the 200 is interesting. If you take it away from me, I don't think that anymore, right? So a lot of it's been
No.
the leadership, the big names, the McDonald's, the Starbucks. They have been, just tough places to be from a bullish point of view. But it's not all bad. You're seeing decent things in Costco and Charter. Costco potential little bit of a breakout candidate going into, we had a pullback opportunity, bumped into resistance this week, now goes from a pullback candidate to a breakout candidate, right, as is so often the case. So there's some interesting things out there on both sides, but across the board, it seems weird to me that it's nothing on the ETF.
Oh
It's
yeah.
just stuck in the mud.
Yes.
I mean, that
Terrible
makes sense
place.
on staples. Staples make sense going nowhere in a market like this, but this is supposed to be exciting. This is where we got a retail space, and we do have some retail earnings coming up throughout November. One interesting chart I did want to take a peek at here was Burlington, BURL, within this space. Had a big pop on earnings there at the end of August, has went sideways ever since. Got a little bit of time before earnings, about 25 days, 23 days, something like that. A little bit of a breakout candidate maybe. I really like when we have that gap on earnings, although I wish it was a little bit faster. I didn't need to wait 2 months
Yeah.
to potentially break 2 or 3 weeks is fine. But I thought that was a really interesting chart myself.
It's clean. I mean, that's what we like. We like a clean base, easy to spot resistance, easy to identify entry point. You look on the weekly, very lovely little high base there. Nice week
Yeah.
this week too, right? Nice candlestick. So yeah, I
This
like
could
it.
be time sensitive. Hopefully a small green candle next week and then to break the following week, because we don't have a lot of time between now and earnings, which means it'll probably break the 4 days before earnings, right?
That's right.
so
That's right.
there we are, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully gives you kind of a look at some of the things that Tyler and I do. The other coaches, we all have our own style, but I think that's a big part of kind of what the routine looks like, is looking at the ETF and then guiding our way into the different components within these different areas. So hopefully that does give you some ideas as you're maybe building your own watch list here today. I know we're running out of time here, Ty. Going through this stuff takes some time. I love doing it. It's fun. Maybe Ty and I will just take over. I don't know if Matt and Tim will, but now they've given us the keys. We know how to get in, right?
Well, yeah, and I was so excited to get in. I jumped in 10 minutes early, and
exactly, rocking and rolling. So that's always going to be fun. We'll be looking really wise the first 3 minutes for anybody who watches a little later in the day. They'll wonder, who are these two clowns that took over the halftime report? So sorry about that, guys. And halftime crew, always great to sit in with you guys. Was this helpful? Was this fun? A different approach, than maybe our usual Friday Frank day but hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I always, I never get tired of looking at stock charts. I'm that dork who was up at 6 o'clock this morning with coffee looking at charts, and I'm all right with it. That's who I am. And then tonight I'll play video games. I'm a very exciting person. No wonder they didn't take me to Vegas, right? So, any final words, Ty? Anything particular you're looking at going here?
I don't know if you saw Activision today. It gapped down on earnings. Did recover. I don't like it now as much, but was happy to see that this sidestepped any kind of major down gap. I still like the stock right now.
You know what's interesting about that is I read, and so I didn't research. I read an article that I think is reputable, that they actually had their biggest subscriber count on World of Warcraft history.
Yeah.
And back in 2010, there were what, 10 million people playing it. I mean, a lot. With the release of their classic game, they brought a lot of subscribers back to the table. Now, that's just one component, but it is kind of the flagship for Blizzard, the Blizzard side of that company. A nice response. If we can maybe break out a few weeks from now, I think Activision is worth following. They kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit with some bad PR right after, at least what I kind of interpreted as bad PR right after the launch of Classic. But good response to the earnings. I didn't have a chance to dig into that one, but they're certainly something I think is worth keeping an eye on.
Well, and I have two questions. The first question I have is vernacular. So in video gaming, right here, the company's third quarter reported adjusted revenue or net bookings. Why is net bookings a synonym for revenue in the gaming industry?
I just play them. So I don't know.
What is a net booking? I've never heard that term outside of the video game.
Yeah, I do not know the answer to that.
Okay. Second question is, have you downloaded, I didn't know there was a Call of Duty mobile. They said it got downloaded 100 million times.
Really? Yeah, I don't do the mobile games. I'm a desktop purist, but that is impressive. Over 100 million. Wow.
They've got some in the first month.
They've got some numbers. They recently had their BlizzCon and kind of got people excited. Of course, they always do. Although last time they didn't. They kind of they have some problems sometimes, kind of saying some weird things. But that's an interesting read. Like the response, it would have been easy to see that get out of hand, right? It would have been easy to just be selling, and that's a big red candle that we're seeing today instead of a little bit of, let's buy this dip. I'm with you, but at the same time, if you kind of fast forward a little bit, we drift back towards that resistance zone over the next couple of weeks. All of a sudden, doesn't this become a pretty interesting breakout candidate?
Yeah, and I've been using cash flow strategies on this for the last couple of months, and it scares you every once in a while with these intraday sell-offs, but by and large, buyers have eventually emerged where you needed them to. Maybe it changes, but yeah, I'm emboldened by that, and yes, the nice thing is you got a clear line in the sand if you're waiting for a breakout.
So yes, we're probably a couple weeks away, but certainly worth keeping an eye on. Awesome stuff, Ty, as always. And a lot of fun doing this with you. And Halftime Crew, if you enjoy a little bit of Tyler coming in and keeping us on the straight and narrow, give us a subscribe, give us a like. We always appreciate it. If you like what we're doing, it's always helpful to help us get the message out. If you're not already a member of the channel, welcome. It's great to have you here with us. We've got our scouting report meeting here tonight, a little bit later this afternoon. We'll get those reports, that newsletter to you here tomorrow, so you can be ready to rock and roll here on Tuesday. Right, market will be closed on Monday. One of those rare, wow. Good thing
are stocks closed or just bonds on Monday?
I thought it was the stock market. I think it is. I guess I could be wrong. I'm just assuming I have Monday to hang around and take a nap. So maybe we should officially do that.
I'm double checking. What is the date? It is
the
November 9th.
So it'll be November 9th. So we will be open. So it's just the bonds then, right?
I think it's just bonds.
Am I reading that right? All right, then we'll see you on Monday. You'll be ready to rock and roll on Monday. I might not be. I might just plead ignorance, be like, hey, I thought the market was closed. I'm not going to do anything. But we'll have you ready to rock and roll here for next week. If you're not a member of the team, we of course invite you to head over to tackletrading.com. We can get you hooked up with a 15-day free trial so you can come see what we're all about. We're more than just some dudes hanging out on YouTube, kind of looking like they've never used a computer before, right, Ty?
Amateurs, man, a bunch of amateurs.
So, and we got to make it interesting. All right, halftime crew. Well, you guys have a fantastic rest of the day, a fantastic upcoming weekend. We will see you all here once again next week for another exciting week in the market. So thank you all so much. Have a great weekend, and we're out. Well, maybe we're out. Tyler, Tyler will eventually let us out. We're in until we're out.
Where's my control panel? Where's my control panel?
There
2
you
seconds,
go.
friends. We're out like for reals in a second.